Just hours left in this shortened session here in Hartford. Hi there, I'm David Smith. Meet the leaders, and we are pleased to have Senator Scott Frantz with us today. And Senator, it's nice to see you. You're relatively bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for the last few days of the session. These are going to be long ones, I sense.
I sense they will be long as well. We did have a nice respite yesterday. We had Sunday off, and the weather forecast was a little bit worse than it actually ended up being, so we're very happy, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, as you say.
Last couple of days, beautiful sunshine and 70 degrees and so forth, and you will be locked in today. You have always been one focusing closely on the budget and have some pretty hard and fast ideas on where it's gone right and where it's gone wrong. Suggestion is, it's balanced. It got signed, it's all set. Problems?
Well, yeah. I mean, you have to come up with a balanced budget. It's a constitutional requirement to do so. It's just a question of how creative you have to get given the economic and fiscal circumstances that exist at that particular point in time. And right now, we have a really lousy economy. Our revenues to the state are way down. As we all know, we were surprised by a $460 million reduction, literally overnight, of income tax revenue to the state of Connecticut. That puts us in a really bad position going forward.
All right, to that end, now people at home are sitting there and going, no wait, when I lay out my budget and I figure out what I'm making and what I'm not making and so forth and what I'm spending, I got a fairly good handle on where I am in the fiscal scheme of things. And to lose $450 or $60 million in just a couple of weeks is more than at least a little surprising to some folks observing this.
It is. It's kind of earth-shattering to people up here, especially those who don't really follow this closely. A lot of us, some of us anyway, do follow these numbers pretty closely, and it was fundamentally obvious what was going to happen. The numbers were overly optimistic because in 2012 you had the expiration of the tax cuts from previous years, and in 2013 people were going to report the sales of their positions in the stock markets. There was going to be a big boon to the state of Connecticut. Now, if those people had gone in and repositioned themselves in the market in 2013 calendar year, they're not going to sell until they have at least a year under their belt those different positions, because then you pay short-term capital gains, there's a huge penalty. So obviously, you're not going to get that kind of revenue in 2014 from 2013. So gross overestimation of the kind of proceeds that the state would seek.
But what is the point of grossly overestimating things like that?
Oh, well, is it an election year this year?
Well, except it's come home to roost very clearly now. I mean, we're down at $44 million in surplus, and and even that's perhaps evaporating.
Well, I think the whole election cycle starts well earlier than, say, 6 months before the election these days. I think it's a year, maybe a year and a half even, and it's arguable that you're campaigning for 4 years. So you always want to be showing good numbers, but you don't want to go too far so that there is a big surprise like we saw last week. But now here we are with a balanced budget still. We had a $500 million quote-unquote surplus, which I've been accusing it as a false surplus, which is now down to about $43 million surplus, but it's still a surplus. And we might even be able to bump that up a little bit by adding some more, hidden tax revenue to the state of Connecticut, such as tax amnesty program round 2, which may be wishful thinking. We don't know. Maybe DRS can comment on that. But to get back to where we need to be, I think they're stretching again.
All right. From your standpoint, what would you have liked to have seen done to remediate this situation?
Well, you're great. You ask this question every year, and it's a legitimate question. I would say this: if we had done a flashback to 6 years ago, we had a chance at that point to start to fundamentally change the cost structure of the state of Connecticut. Every year that goes by, there are new contracts, there's new obligations and expectations that make it that much more difficult. We have a cost structure problem, and until we get our hands around that, we're always going to have a problem meeting the nugget that we need every year, because the tax base can't handle it, or they don't want to handle it, and a lot of them are moving out. In our neck of the woods, I know for a fact, anecdotally as well as fact, that there are a lot of people who have moved out in just the last year alone, and there are a lot of people that are planning on moving out in addition. It's not just the Eddie Lambert high-profile hedge fund person, it's the other people just below him.
Well, this is the shortened session, but it is not going to be short days for the rest of this session for you, that is for sure. I want to thank you very much for sharing some of your time because you're going to be booked solid for the next 48 hours anyway.
Always a pleasure, David. Thank you.
Indeed. Senator Scott
Thank you.
Frantz, our guest on this edition of Meet the Leaders. But that is all the time we've got. That is not all the time the legislators have, but that time is ticking away too, that's for sure. Glad to have you with us on this edition of Meet the Leaders from Hartford in the waning stage of this session. I'm David Smith, and we will look for you next time.